I think, as is the case for most people in this country and around the world, the past 24 hours has been shocking and surprising, at the very least. As someone who knew Michael as well and as long as you did, maybe give us a sense of your initial reaction to what you've heard.
Well, I was disbelief. You know, in the beginning, it's just disbelief because there was no warning and nothing. He was no illness or anything to kind of set you up for that. So, and like all icons like that, you sort of believe that they'll go on forever, you know. And it was the same thing with Michael Jackson. He was someone that had a great impact on my life musically and as a human being.
Maybe take us back to the 80s and give us a sense of where you were, what you were doing, who you were working with, and when you first met Michael.
Okay, I was National Director of Promotions for Epic Records in New York City. When we first signed the Jacksons, it wasn't the Jackson 5 anymore because I believe one of his brothers was off on his solo career. And they had a project called Victory. So we did a national tour. We did a big tour with Michael. We flew into Kansas City. Matter of fact, it was the first time that I met Michael. That's when they were kicking off that tour with the Jacksons. And then we had that release. I worked with him on Off the Wall and also on Thriller, which my immediate supervisor and superior at that time was Frank DeLeo, which ended up being Michael's manager. But went out to Michael's home frequently, have visited with him and his family, knew his father, knew all of his brothers, met with him in Quincy during the production of Thriller, and worked with them closely during the release of Thriller. So, I mean, I felt that, you know, when you're caught up in that, I guess you don't see the impact of something like that would have on the rest of the world because you're working with it daily, day by day, and you just get involved with so much with the music and all of it, and it was the perfect timing. It was the coming together, as they say, of the perfect storm. It was the birth of MTV, the birth of music videos, and the birth of Thriller all happened at the same time.
And as someone who had a pretty, perhaps a front row seat to this, at the time you said, didn't quite expect it to become what it became, but looking back on it now, did you see it coming?
I always had a sense, I mean, once you heard that project in the beginning, matter of fact, we had advanced cassettes now. It was back in the day we had advanced cassettes on Thriller. And I remember taking it over to some friends of mine's house. Matter of fact, the former vice president of Motown, which was a friend of mine, I took it over to let them listen to it. And we were just struck that we knew it was going to be a huge project. Because he had just come off the Wall, which had probably sold about 10 million copies at that time. I think it was about four or five at that time. But we all knew it was going to be a major release. But what really happened with that project, we were so ambitious about the promotions and marketing of it that we released simultaneous singles in 2 or 3 different formats. We released Beat It on the pop market and released Billie Jean for urban and black radio. So we were running with 2 or 3 singles at the same time. So it's something that nobody else has ever done.
Tell me a bit about Michael the person. When did he first realize what his music career was becoming?
Michael was an entity unto himself. You know, when you meet him and talk to him as a person, he was one person, and when he was on stage, he was an entirely different person. I remember when I first went out to his home, Emilia and myself went out for an interview that we had set up for him to do for radio, and we spent hours with him in his studio. He was very laid back, very easy to get along with, very easy personality, just a real super nice person, but a perfectionist, you know. I mean, everything had to be a certain way, every sound had to be a certain way. So he had his destiny in his hands at that time, and I think he always was in control of what he wanted to do, at least musically, you know. And it just grew to be such a monster project. It just engulfed everything. I mean, even country radio stations, I think, was playing Thriller. They were so big, you know. So, I mean, it just captured, it was just the right sound, the right individual, the right person at the right time.
And there really hasn't been anything quite like that since.
Never will be. Never will be. I don't believe we'll ever see anything like Michael Jackson in my lifetime or in our lifetime. I know not as the industry is not in the same situation that it was back then, you know. I mean, for someone to sell almost 40 million CDs nowadays, man, it's just practically impossible. And it's just for someone to just capture it, and plus having all that history with everyone, most of everyone grew up on Michael Jackson, from ABC, from his days back in Motown until he grew into what he became, which was, you know, a mega music mogul, and he absolutely was the king of pop.
I think a lot of people would agree it's a tragedy, some of the things that have happened throughout his life. And taking all that out of this conversation for the moment, what do you think his legacy will be?
His music. I think his music and the impact that he's made upon people's lives. Matter of fact, I was looking at the Houston Chronicle, looking at the paper this morning, and see people in record stores crying and on the streets crying. I mean, it's like a John Lennon or an Elvis Presley. You know, those are icons that you just will never see another one of them. It's just a one-of-a-kind situation. When
was the last time you actually saw him in person?
I think I saw Michael last time I was in Los Angeles at one of the conventions back in the 90s. I haven't seen him since the 90s. We spoke, had a few words with each other. I used to hear from him almost every holiday. He would always call during the Christmas holidays, and had a very close relationship with my daughters. My children had met him. I mean, he was a very caring, warm person, always had time to interact with anybody that he had a personal relationship with.
And looking back at the pictures you have found for us today, is there a single memory or a couple of memories that really sets this experience apart, the last 20-plus years?
You know what, I mean, when you're involved in it, I guess you don't really see the magnetism of it at the moment, you know. But just me being who I was at the time that I met him, when I was in my late 20s or something, and met him with Victory and all that, you know, you flash back to my childhood, because I grew up on Michael Jackson, you know, on ABC and all of the big hits that he had at Motown, and never thought that I'd ever have the chance of actually working with him or being with him. And I just feel like it was just an honor and a privilege.
Any parting thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Well, I just think that it's going to be a big vacancy in the industry and in the world. I mean, even though he had been accused of a lot of things that, you know, we were shorn upon or frowned upon, and which I never really truly believed after meeting him and being personally involved with him for so many years. But I know that there will never be another Michael Jackson.